This is the second part to A Good Man's Sin, Genesis 9:18 to 29. We all easily become callous towards sin. Really, don't you think? What's the big deal? Ham just looks on his father's nakedness and his own son, and his descendants get cursed. That seems a bit extreme, not to mention unfair. But it seems to me that our attitude reveals our own callousness towards sin. We are so used to having moral filth dumped into our living rooms every night through the 21-inch sewer line, TV, that we don't even know it when we see it. Even worse, we find humor in it when we should be horrified. I've never watched the current most popular TV shows such as Seinfeld, Friends, and NYPD Blue, but I have read descriptions of such shows in the American Family Association Journal, and even the description are too gross to share from the pulpit. These shows and many more are raw filth. I'm going to make a statement that may step on some toes, but I stand behind it. If you watch such filth, you will not become a godly person. I used to paint houses, and after a few hours, I couldn't smell the paint. Surrounded by the stench of sin, after a while we don't notice it. The only way to grow more sensitive to sin is to be in the Word daily and to avoid exposing yourself needlessly to the evil around us. Ham's sin shows us that sins, which don't seem big at the time, can have far-reaching consequences, not only for ourselves but for our descendants. A trickle of sin in a parent can become a flood in his descendants. Noah's drunkenness and impropriety led to Ham's irreverence. Ham's sin led eventually to the corruption of the Canaanites, who practiced orgastic sensual worship, cult prostitution, and homosexuality. But what of the problem of Canaan being cursed for Ham's sin? Several things can be said. First, like it or not, we must recognize that the sins of parents do affect their children and grandchildren, sometimes for many generations. Some think that this is unfair, so they reject God. But taking God out of the picture doesn't solve the problem. It is an observable fact of life whether you believe in God or not. Even if you take God out of the picture, you still have the unfair fact that some children are loved while others are abused. Some children are cared for while others are neglected. Kids often suffer because of their parents' self-centered, sinful lives. It's only when you put God into the picture that there's any hope, because through the gospel, those children have a chance to break out of the cycle of abuse and to raise their child proper. I love the way that's worded there. It's only when you put God into the picture that there's any hope. Amen. Second, we need to see that Noah's words are more of a prophecy than a curse. Noah is giving a thumbnail sketch of the course of world history through his sons. He may have based his prophecy in part on character traits he had already observed in his grandson, but beyond that, he is speaking an oracle under the inspiration of God, predicting the course of nations, not of an individual. He is not putting a hex on his grandson so that Canaan could not help himself, nor is he fixing the fate of every person descended from Canaan, as if individuals could not escape the curse. Rather, he is predicting that Canaan's descendants would serve the descendants of Shem and Japheth. Contrary to what some have taught, the black race is not descended from Canaan. His descendants were those peoples dwelling in the land of Canaan when Israel conquered the land under Joshua. The prophecy was fulfilled under Joshua and Solomon, both of whom put Canaan's descendants in forced service to Israel, and later when the Romans defeated the Phoenicians. Also, to understand this curse on Canaan, we need to remember that the Canaanites were not innocent people who unjustly suffered under a curse imposed on their ancestor. They were a morally corrupt people whose sin far exceeded that of their ancestor. While God sovereignly ordains all things, people are accountable for their own sin. When God ordered Moses to kill all the people dwelling in the land of Canaan, which Israel never fully carried out, it was God's judgment on their gross, unrepentant sin. They were not innocent victims. Finally, it helps us understand this difficult passage if we fit into Moses' theological purpose in writing Genesis. Moses was writing to a stubborn, disobedient people who were inclined to return to bondage in Egypt rather than conquer the land of Canaan. He was about to die and would not be leading them into the land. He wrote the Pentateuch to show Israel God's pattern of blessing on those who obey him and cursing on those who disobey. He wanted to motivate Israel to endure whatever hardship was necessary to take the land and to keep themselves from the moral contamination of the Canaanites. Note that our section starts off by mentioning the 3 sons of Noah, from whom the whole earth was populated. It makes a special double reference to the fact that Ham is the father of Canaan. Since the next chapter states this, it is needed here unless it is making a special point to Moses' readers, namely, to trace God's pattern of blessing and cursing with reference to these 3 branches of the human race, with special reference to the Canaanites, the corrupt people Israel would soon be facing in warfare. Israel undoubtedly had heard of the moral corruption of the Canaanites. When Moses' readers saw the words, Ham was the father of Canaan, they would have said, yes, Ham's corrupt conduct reveals him as the true father of Canaan. In Leviticus 18, the evil deeds of the Canaanites, which Israel was to avoid, are described repeatedly with the words uncover and nakedness. While these descendants of Ham and Canaan had gone far beyond what Ham did, no Israelite could fail to make the connection. The seed of Ham's sin had come to a full harvest in his descendants through Canaan. So Moses' purpose was to warn Israel of the evil practices of the Canaanites, to trace their sin to its source, and to justify their subjugation through holy warfare. They were a people under God's curse because of their sin. I'm indebted to Alan Ross, Bibliotheca Sacra, for much of the analysis above.